Now, in this part of the show, we really want to delve deeper into issues. Now, last week we covered COVID myths, and this week we're discussing all things social media regulation. So today, Mo Farah has said that racism against black athletes is getting worse. The Olympic great has called for social media companies to be held accountable after revealing that he has been sent shocking racist comments in the past. With that revelation, and of course, we have heard how the England lads, Marcus Rashford, Jadon Sancho and Bukayo Saka, difficult one to say, were all racially abused following that 10th penalty shootout. But so is it time to ensure that social media companies do more to stem the tide for online racism? The FA has said that the tech giants need to step up and take accountability. And Boris Johnson has pledged to take action via an online safety bill. The big three, Instagram, Facebook and Twitter, have also promised to remove racist abuse from their platforms. Twitter used machine learning to remove more than 1,000 offending tweets. Surely it's more than that. But is this enough? I'm joined tonight with my guests to discuss whether users wanting to post on social media should be required to put their names and identities to their comments. So tonight we have with us Julie Dawson, who's the Director of Policy at Yoti, which is a social media app that does require users to identify themselves, and Jim Killock, who's the Executive Director at Open Rights Group, and Imran Ahmed, the CEO of the Centre for Countering Digital Hate. So I'm going to start really with Imran, because you're dealing with the Centre for Accounting for Digital Hate. So talk to me about how much hate there is. I mean, on a level of 1 to 10, because Twitter found 1,000 comments. I mean, there's got to be more than that, right?
Well, I mean, look, we know that these platforms are replete with hate, and in fact, they have done very little to clean up their own platforms, enforce their own community standards. So as an example, on Sunday night when we got back from the game, my team decided to go and start tracking some of the racist insults that were being put on the page, the posts of the 3 football players who missed penalties. And we found 105 bits of outright racism, use of the N-word, monkey emojis, bananas, etc. We reported it to the platforms, doing the right thing, using their own tools for reporting racist comments, because, of course, they're not allowed on their platforms. And then we went back 24 hours later to check what action had been taken. Only 6 had been dealt with. And this is despite the fact that in February 2021, Instagram, for example, said that it would delete the account of anyone who was racist to a footballer on their platform. The problem is that community standards exist on these platforms. They're both rights and responsibilities. There are responsibilities as users not to break those terms and conditions that we sign up to when we use it. And there are rights as users to expect a platform in which we can post and not receive racial abuse. That system is broken down because of a failure to act. And what that leads to, of course, is that people who are black, women, gay people feel that those platforms aren't somewhere they can go without facing a torrent of abuse. And that's regressive, because what that's doing is pushing out of public discourse and public spaces people that we've fought very hard in our country to ensure are listened to. And that's part of what makes Britain brilliant. We're tolerant, we're open, we're inclusive. These are becoming very exclusive spaces, though, full of abuse and hatred.
So you feel that these social media companies need to do more to counteract this online abuse?
We simply want them to do what they promised they will do. They promised it to the Prime Minister. They promised it to the public. They promised it to the players. They have it in their own community standards. We're simply saying enforce those community standards, because those are both responsibilities as users, but also the rights that we have as a user to expect a platform free of it. Who's setting those standards? The platforms themselves. And they have the right to set those standards because, of course, that is actually their First Amendment, their freedom of speech right, as they've argued in court repeatedly, is to be able to moderate their platforms in a way that makes them pleasant places to be, and certainly not unpleasant places to be.
Let's have a chat with Jim Killock. He's the Executive Director at Open Rights Group. Jim, do you agree with Imran? That's what he's saying?
I agree with a lot of what's been said. I think the basic problem here is that social media platforms have become somewhat monopolistic, and they don't have the kind of market pressure to improve their behavior, because if you think about it, you'd never go down a pub or a club if you thought it was an unpleasant place to be, and that you would encounter abuse and generally find it an unpleasant experience. So platforms ought to have no interest in this. But what they have, unfortunately, is a kind of interest in having lots of attention. And that creates, I think, a kind of tabloid market, if you like, where things which are unpleasant cause argumentation, cause response. They get prioritized and they are incentivized by the way the platforms are designed. And that's because they're in this attention market. They want all this attention. And that then causes the platforms to design effectively very problematic content in. So to me, the first thing we need to do if we really want to tackle abuse is to create a competition between these platforms. We need to be able to say, well, I don't like the way that Twitter handles abuse. I don't like that. I think they do a really bad job on moderation. So I want to use something else. Now, the problem is that people are kind of locked into Twitter and Facebook and so on because they spent a huge amount of time and so on working to build their accounts up. So the only way you can get this to work is so that social media actually works more like, say, email or your telephone. I mean, you don't need to buy 6 telephones to talk to people around the world, but somehow you do need to get, an account on each of these platforms. So they have to be opened up. And this is called interoperability. If that happened, we would see a much better kind of environment. There's a whole parallel kind of social media world out there where this happens already on things like Mastodon. And they have very, very good moderation cultures because people who are trolls get kicked off. And trolls go to their own trolls places and nobody bothers interacting with them. And
so Jim, you're saying that they could literally...
So
Jim, you're saying that they should almost regulate themselves. That doesn't sound convincing that they will. Let's have a chat with Julie.
I'm not...
Sorry, go on then.
Of course, they need some degree of regulation, but we're talking about whether the market can be the first thing. When monopolies misbehave, they're monopolies, they misbehave. If we regulate monopolies as monopolies, what will happen is they will continue to misbehave, and we will get the most minimum kind of changes. So unless we get freedom to actually choose where we go and what platforms work, we're going to be stuck in this loop.
So basically, they compete against each other to be the best one at throwing people off their platform if they're abusive. But in a sense, that's almost like you're slightly leaving them to look at each other and ultimately deal with it themselves, which I don't know how convincing that is. Let's have a chat with Julie Dawson. She's the Director of Regulatory and Policy. Oh, we've just lost her. I'll come back to Imran, actually. Imran, if you could, you've heard what Jim said, that he's suggesting that if they compete against each other to be the best platform, that people will actually join the better platform that's regulated in a better way. Does that sound like something that you think is a realistic approach?
Look, I live in the United States where there's a lot of pressure right now for breakup of the tech companies. Let me explain to you why that pressure is there. First of all, the tech companies don't compete when it comes to the advertising market. So 98% of Facebook's revenues, which owns Instagram as well, and WhatsApp, come from advertising. And that advertising is why they don't care if the content is malignant or great. They don't care about public good. They don't care about truth. What they care about is the content engaging. And unfortunately, it's our own behavior sometimes that we actually get engaged in arguments, ding-dongs over, whether or not something is racist or not. And we actually amplify the engagement of those malignant posts, thus telling the algorithms, put this into more people's feeds. And that's all they really care about. Now, look, if there was competition, there'd not just be economic competition for advertisers, most of whom don't like the fact their adverts appear on sites that are full of hatred and misinformation. But you'd also create moral competition. And I think your other guest who works for Yoti and Mastodon, which I admit I've never heard of, it's good that there is competition. But the truth is that the anti-competitive practices of very large companies like Facebook and Instagram, which dominate the market, these are enormous mega companies, and that then there does need to be some breakup there. But I think there are other simpler things that we can do in the interim. For example, Germany says with the NetzDG law, if you actually promote extremism and if you don't take it down, once you know about it, at that point, you, Mr. Social Media Company, are culpable and we will fine you. And lo and behold, what did Facebook do? They hired loads of moderators in Berlin, in Essen, in other cities around the country, actually taking down Holocaust denial, the sort of stuff that dehumanizes Jews and people of other races and religions. There is a solution. Make them pay a little bit for the harm they create.
Welcome to the GB News YouTube channel. You can watch us live 24 hours a day, catch up on your favourite shows, and join in the conversation in the comments below.
Don't forget to subscribe and you'll never miss any of our exclusive content.